This is Noel Poirier, OGS Executive Director and host of the Ohio Roots Podcast. It's hard to believe that it's been a year that we've been doing the Ohio Roots Podcast, but here we are. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's been listening from the very beginning and to everybody who's just joining us maybe for the first time now. Thank you so much for listening to the Ohio Roots Podcast, and hey, happy birthday. Welcome to Ohio Roots, the official podcast of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey through Ohio's rich genealogy, history, and abundant resources. Hosted by me, OGS Executive Director Noel Poirier, this podcast brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests, from OGS members, chapter leaders, and staff to renowned genealogists, historians, and influential figures within the genealogical community. Each episode delves into fascinating topics and captivating stories. So grab your headphones, hit that play button, and join us on this enthralling journey of Ohio's roots. My guest on this episode of the Ohio Roots Podcast is author Allison Barnhart. Allison is from Ashland County, Ohio, and she's the author of a book called The Record Keeper, The Unfolding of a Family Secret in the Age of Genetic Genealogy. And I'm really looking forward to talking to her about her experiences and how she came about discovering these family secrets and all of her interests that led her to write this book. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation today with Allison Barnhart. I'd like to welcome Allison Barnhart to the Ohio Roots Podcast today for our conversation. Thank you, Allison, so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to join us.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. I'll start with a question I ask everybody that we have on the podcast. How is it you got involved or interested in pursuing family history or genealogy?
Well, I was probably in elementary school. I loved listening to my grandparents' stories. They told them in a way that wasn't boring to me. And so I was really fascinated with just the idea of where did I come from? Who are all my family members? So I'd ask a lot of questions to them, and they were wonderful about saving pictures and letters. And so they were always good at showing me those things. And we had family, movies from even the 20s, 30s. So I just really absorbed a lot of that early.
Yeah. At what point do you feel like it became kind of a passion for you to actually not just document your family history, but kind of understand?
Yeah, I would say probably around middle school time, which is kind of early, but my grandpa really relied on me to help him dig through some stuff. And so once the internet started coming out, and he realized that I had some extra resources that he wouldn't be able to travel to, or I was able to work with him closely on that. And so I think just his trust in me to find things that he was looking for, and maybe for decades he was looking for it and couldn't find it. It just really made me realize what a special thing that I could do with my grandpa, but also contribute, not just sit and listen the whole time.
So is he kind of the genealogist of the family then?
Yeah, this would be my maternal grandfather, and he even made me a binder, and he wrote me a little message in the front, just encouraging me to explore how I wanted to research and kind of do trial by error, and gave me a lot of the blank forms and census forms, family group forms. So that was neat to be able to have kind of that start. And then, of course, as the internet expanded and I got onto Ancestry.com and a bunch of other resources that either he would tell me about or I found on my own, I just might, once you ask one question, and then the other ones. Right. So.
Yeah. It kind of leads, I guess, talking about photographs and the collection, because it kind of leads into the book, which I would like to talk to you about. And I'll mention it in my intro, of course, but the record keeper, right? Talk to me a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, so this would be on my paternal side, and how it kind of came about is that my my grandmother on that side, she had been remarried, and a lot of her family history was pretty cut and dry. We didn't know a lot about my dad's biological father. But I was always curious what was beyond him, because he wasn't a great guy, and so that my grandma had divorced him when my dad was only 6 years old. So I thought, when you talk about surnames and how you're carrying that along, my dad had 3 girls, me being the oldest of the 3. And I knew that I wasn't carrying on that name, but I still felt a connection to it, being Lawrence. And so I wanted to just find out more about it. And there's a lot of brick walls that were taking place on that side. So going on Ancestry and trying to find distant cousins, they were also hitting brick walls. So the advent of DNA testing was happening and was more accessible to all of us. So we kind of tried it a little early on. 2014, 2015 was when we bought our first kits. And I hadn't taken it, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to have my dad take it, because maybe this will at least point us in the direction of ethnicity.
Right.
And otherwise, I wouldn't have kind of discovered some of the anomalies that, and just learning about what to look for when you're looking at DNA tests and your shared matches. But aside from that, just knowing what I knew about my grandma and her life, I had always been kind of connected and drawn to her story, and done a lot of collages and artwork. I was an art major in college, and a lot of the stuff that she had gone through kind of inspired what I made on my artistic side. And so I was constantly trying to figure out a way to bring art and genealogy together. Okay. And so I think with those things swirling around, and then finding out, or not even really knowing what the results meant, I think that was like the beginning of kind of setting the landscape of the book.
Right. Okay. It's interesting because, obviously there's a secret in the book, and we don't want to give secrets, but all families seem to have those little secrets, and we all come about them as we do our family history differently, I guess. You use DNA, as I understand it, to kind of flesh out your secret, maybe without giving away the secret, because I want people to read.
Spoiler alert.
How did the DNA help?
So I think what it did was, let me think about this. I think what it did was kind of spark that first question, because, some people might grow up and just not know who their parents were or their grandparents, and that is what they want to reveal. I knew who my grandparents and parents were, so I thought. And so you're not asking those questions. And so DNA was pivotal because I wasn't searching for something that I already had in my collection of things,
right?
Or in a census record. I was just curious about ethnicity percentages and to see distant cousins maybe that we could connect with. And so when you have a match that's very close to you and you don't know who they are, but they live in Columbus and you live in Ashland, an hour apart, you have to wonder, why don't I know you? I should know you.
Sure. It's fascinating because I know even in my own family history, there was my great grandfather apparently had been married prior to marrying my great grandmother, and had children before that. It was not something that I had been ever told, as a child or as a historian, by my family. And when I let my other family members know that, some took it very well, and some were kind of resistant to the idea that this could even occur. How has your discovery for your family been accepted or absorbed by your own family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think since I had grown up with a family who shared a lot in stories and pictures, it allowed me to be so curious. And I thought, okay, well, if I have questions now, more as an adult, I should be able to ask them. But now I'm understanding as an adult, these are a little bit sensitive topics. And the things that maybe generations past would say, we don't talk about it, we don't bring it up, we sweep it under the rug or whatnot. I think, those are the things that I was very curious about.
Right, sure.
And so I'm just very fortunate that I had some family members who encouraged the searching. But I will tell you, I very much hesitated the first couple months. I didn't tell my family that who it would affect, like especially my dad. I didn't tell him what I found because I knew how much it would turn his world, especially upside down. And so I had to really wrestle with that and kind of being upset that there wasn't more of a big disclaimer on the DNA kits, but also just being very intrigued and wanting to know our full story. Because that's the thing about genealogy. When you do know somebody's story, you always have to place them in the context of where they were. The one thing just didn't happen. It was in a certain place, in a certain era, in a certain culture that people behaved a certain way, and they did what they did because of many different reasons. And if they're gone, you can't ask them to explain. And so you have to come to your own conclusions. And DNA doesn't tell you that. It only tells you that base fact. So I think that spurred me on to then, since my grandma did keep a lot of things and pass them on to me, fortunately, they were just in my basement. And so all those years later, after my grandma passed away and I'm discovering this, I was just able to bring up totes from my basement, and I started pulling out everything I could, photo albums and scrapbooks and postcards, looking for clues that would help support what I'm finding in DNA. And sure enough, I found it.
Unlock the mysteries of your ancestry with the Ohio Genealogical Society at www.ogs.org. Dive deep into your family's past and connect with fellow enthusiasts. Join us now for exclusive access to expert insights, resources, and a vibrant community. Visit www.ogs.org and start your genealogical journey today. If you enjoy listening to the Ohio Roots podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could go to whatever platform it is that you listen and give us a good review. Reviews help us get more listeners and reach more people with Ohio Roots and what we're trying to do with the Ohio Genealogical Society. So please leave us a nice review, and thanks for listening.
And when you found it and you sat down and said, I'm going to make this a public thing, writing a book, how did that process begin?
Yeah, I think it was very accidental at first. After our family kind of, I sat them down and gave them all binders because I wanted to be very scientific about it. And like I did my research. I'm not just trying to fly off the cuff and make something up. But I think just hearing them say, oh, this should be a book. Well, a lot of times we hear that and don't realize the work that it takes to put into doing something like that. And so I think it just started because I had been collecting along the way what was happening when and how I was discovering it. And so I thought that I couldn't really keep it as many times as I verbally told people the story. There was still something that I needed to kind of write it out. And I didn't know if that would be just chronological. I didn't want it to seem dull in any way, that I was just saying what I discovered when, what was happening, but trying to tell it in a way that really honored my grandma and her story, and the fact that sometimes you're kind of thrown for a loop in genealogy, whether it's a DNA test or whether you find a document of sorts or a picture that you're like, who is this? Or, they never told me about this incident that happened. And being able to just kind of have more compassion and empathy for whatever was going on at the time. And so collecting all of that, it ended up just kind of flowing out of me. And of course, when COVID, when we were all just inside, I was able to find a little bit more time to write my thoughts down. So I didn't really intend to publish it. It was more for our family.
Right.
But as many people that said, this is an amazing story, I think other people would be interested in it. So I tried to tell it in a way that wasn't telling anyone else's story. It was just me and my journey of discovering this, and maybe relatable to how other people, when they find out things about their family, how they feel, and, you know, the hard moments when you try to navigate other people in your family who it's going to affect, and their own personalities and their own path, and making sure that you are able to tell the truth, but you're not hurting people in the process. And so that's a very delicate balance.
Yeah. And when you write a book like this, obviously there's an audience for it, which is, particularly when it's your own family history. People who are related to you or have a connection to your family are going to obviously be interested.
Yeah.
What is it you hope other genealogists or other family historians or other just people who just want to read the book and get something out of it, what do you hope they get from it as they look at their own families, or even if they're doing their own families?
I think I would hope that they would allow themselves the freedom to put themselves in their ancestors' shoes, taking the time with individuals in their family tree, and not just trying to get as many people on your tree as possible, and flying through the sources, but really from birth to death, trying to, you know, whether or not it's a book, it can be this visual or even verbal way of telling their story that makes them really human. And I mean, it's probably a lot of us genealogists are very rabbit trail kind of people, and that's probably why we find the things we do. But I think sometimes it helps build that whole picture of a story, because when I know that they lived in an area and I look at who their neighbors were, or I look at what school they went to, it fleshes that out for me way more than if I wouldn't have researched that. So I'm hoping that it helps people, you know, maybe even give more grace to people in their family who made mistakes, or unintentional things happened, maybe intentional things, but that they started somewhere to get to a certain spot, just like we all do, and kind of shaping their story so that they're just more relatable and human.
Well, I think you just said what I was about to say. We sometimes forget when we're doing our genealogy and we're listing our names and our marriages and our names, and our children, and we sometimes forget that they're human beings, and that they lived at a certain time in history, and that they had a life between those dates that we care about as genealogists. Yeah. And I think books like yours certainly help flesh that out, in the idea that there's more to it than just birth, and there's a lot going on that we need to be comfortable with. You kind of mentioned earlier, and I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit, if you don't mind, that, you know, when you started, there were some brick walls that were coming up. How many of those brick walls were related to what you ended up discovering as a result of the DNA?
Are you talking about brick walls with my dad's supposed family, or
I would assume so. I mean, my assumption is that if your DNA told you, again, not wanting to spoil her, if your DNA told you something, obviously if you're doing general genealogy research, you're going to hit brick walls when you hit that side, because it obviously won't connect. So I'm curious if those brick walls kind of set off some alarm bells that made you think about the DNA.
Mm-hmm. I think at that time it did not, because and still even now, I wouldn't say that I'm a super advanced genealogist. I'm wanting to learn more and more and more. And certainly not back then. I figured I just didn't have the resources, or maybe things weren't scanned. And so I was really relying on some retired relatives that were searching. And when they said, yeah, I can't find anything either, I thought, well, maybe it's just good to stop for a little bit.
Right. So the DNA then, I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier, you just kind of did it to look at ethnicity and those kind of things, which I think is what a lot of people do.
Oh, yeah.
When they buy a DNA kit now, particularly the general population.
Mm-hmm.
So when you got your DNA test back, and I'm assuming this was for your father.
Yes.
Is that when the alarm bells went off? Was there something really odd that you? I mean, I know you mentioned this person in Columbus without kidding,
Mm-hmm.
but were there other aspects to it that you kind of went, this isn't making sense to what I know on paper?
Yeah, absolutely. I think since we didn't know too much about my dad's real dad, spoiler alert, he's not, but I don't know how else to get around that. But
that's okay.
What we knew about him was only in the United States. And so when it came back that he was half Scandinavian, it was like 46% Scandinavian, I thought, whoa, I didn't know he was like from there. That's kind of interesting. And so I kept that in the back of my mind. We just thought it was kind of a surprise, and we thought probably German or English. And so we kind of just let that go for a little bit. It was probably a year and a half before my cousin down in Columbus and I could actually say, wait, there is something off. Especially when she decided to tell me that her family has originally come from Sweden, not too far in the past. And I thought, oh no. So I think that's kind of what first alerted. And then more of the people on her side started taking the test, and I started seeing them come up. And I think the other thing that alerted me was the fact that the few Lorentz relatives that I knew that I was working with already through just Ancestry and records, I said, oh, they probably haven't taken the test yet because I don't see them coming up as matches for my dad. And so when I reached out to them and said, hey, just, if you ever wanted to take the test, let me know. I'm kind of trying to match some things up. And they were like, well, we have taken it. And I said, well, why aren't you matching with my dad? So that was the other coin of it, kind of confirming that he doesn't have this relation, but he may be related to this pack of Swedish people over here.
And I think that's what's fascinating about your book and your journey, that I think any of us who do genealogy can take away from it, which is there are a lot of mysteries to our families. And you sometimes have to take what your living relatives tell you with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
About what happens. How has your family now reacted generally to the information that you provided through your research?
Yeah, it was definitely a world upside down kind of situation. I know a lot of people now, since 2020, will say, before that or after that. In our family, it is before 2017 when we were not in the know of this other family. And now after 2017 being, you kind of take on that new identity when you accept it. And so to be able to share that with everybody and then make sure that everybody was able to share what they felt about it, I think was important. And I was just really floored when my dad ended up having 7 half sisters out of this. And most of them
was he aware of them?
No.
Wow.
We weren't aware of this other family at all. Wow. And neither were his other brothers who he did grow up with. All of them were just shocked that this was real. And my grandma had completely kept it to herself for 60 years. Now, I don't know if other people did know that have passed, but it was a complete shocker. So when they agreed to meet us, My cousin and I met each other first, and it was a really, really special meeting. We're about the same age. And so to be young moms and have this love of genealogy and meet, it was just really special. And then we started meeting the sisters. And so my half aunts and my dad's sisters got together, and they had always wanted a brother, they said. And I was just so touched because they welcomed him and all of us with open arms. There wasn't any hard feelings about any, part of the situation. I think it helped that we found out not until later. I don't know if it would have gone the same way if we had found out 30 years prior or something, but I think they were very accepting. I was almost afraid that some of them would be in denial, but they just kind of said, life is crazy. All right, come on over for Christmas.
Oh, that's great.
It was really wonderful. And I know that is not always the case. And so I'm just very thankful that they have been very, very kind and welcoming. And we have, invited them to our things. And so I think the lament is that we didn't get more time with each other over the decades and missed out on a lot of big moments in all of our lives. But we're starting fresh now. And it's been really, really wonderful getting to know them over the last 7 years.
See, to me, that's one of the best things about doing family history and genealogy is making connections to family, whether known or unknown, and being able to share with them.
Yeah.
Do me a favor, tell folks where they can find your book and purchase it.
Yes, you can find The Record Keeper on Amazon and on barnesandnobles.com. I have a website, AllisonBarnhart.com, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I think that's it.
Great. Well, Allison Barnhart, thank you so much for joining me today on the Ohio Roots podcast. It was a real pleasure speaking to you about The Record Keeper and your journey through your family history. It was really neat to hear that. And I hope our listeners can kind of relate to some of those challenges that we all face when we're doing genealogy. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I was just so happy to be here and talking with you about this. So thanks for having me on.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with author and genealogist Allison Barnhart about how she came to write her memoir, The Record Keeper, The Unfolding of a Family Secret in the Age of Genetic Genealogy. I found it fascinating, kind of the process that she went through and how she got to her conclusions on her family. And also it was interesting to hear how her family has accepted or not accepted or adapted to the genealogical information that Allison was able to uncover through her research and through genetic genealogy. So again, I want to thank Allison Barnhart for being here. You should know that her book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can just search for The Record Keeper by Allison Barnhart, and you'll be able to find it there. And as always, thanks for listening to the Ohio Roots Podcast.
The Ohio Roots Podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Genealogical Society, the premier gateway for discovering your Ohio family history. Hosted by OGS Executive Director Noel Poyer and edited by Luke Poyer. Theme song is Beautiful Ohio, recorded by Bob Stanley and his orchestra in 1944. To learn more about joining the Ohio Genealogical Society, visit www.ogs.org.